With the massive influx of bankruptcy filings in the United States during the mid to late 90s, the business community, particularly banks and credit card companies, lobbied Congress to change the current bankruptcy laws. By 1997, almost 1.4 million people filed for bankruptcy in the United States. In order to stem this record number of bankruptcy filings, Congress needed to rewrite the laws to make it harder for people to file bankruptcy under Chapter 7. By 1998, Congress was ready to act.
Basically, what I wanted was if the debtor could pay off 30% or more of the unsecured debts, then they'd have to file for bankruptcy under Chapter 13, which requires repayment of most debts, rather than Chapter 7, where people essentially wipe out their debt clean.
In the House, Senator Gekas was also attempting to set up a stricter system in regards to who would qualify as a Chapter 7 case.
I didn't think Senator Grassley's 30% went far enough. If debtors are able to pay at least 20% of their unsecured debts and earn at least median income, I say, move them to Chapter 13.
On April 2nd, the bill was passed in the Senate with a 6-1 vote by the Subcommittee on Administrative Oversight and the courts. However, there were still concerns in the very beginning from Senate Democrats such as Dick Durbin.
I had my concerns from the very beginning about the bill. It was clear to me that the bill was too harsh on the poor, so I levied Congress to try and construct a bill that would catch abuses without contorting the system.
During a late-night session, Senators Charles Grassley and Dick Durbin finally reached a compromise. They agreed to condense the number of proposed amendments in the bill. This was key to its survival. Now they had a defense of cloture against the threat of a filibuster. On October 9th, the House adopted the conference report on the bill. However, Democrats were unhappy it left out too many of the consumer protection provisions found in the Senate version. Durbin, appalled by the conference report, said it stripped out the consumer protection provision.
I felt that I had been left out of too many of the decisions. The conference report left out many of the consumer protections that my colleagues and I worked so hard to put in the Senate bill.
There was no reason for the Democratic opposition. The bill protects responsible consumer activity and holds creditors more responsible.
This bill failed for two reasons. One, the Senate bill and the House bill are irreconcilably different. Two, we couldn't get it approved on the omnibus bill because of the Clinton administration wanting a much weaker means test, which is exactly what the main proponents of the bill, the creditors, didn't want.
By 1999, the bill in the Senate was becoming bogged down with controversial amendments. It became less about overhauling the bankruptcy system and more about pushing party ideological agendas. Republicans added amendments to exclude Social Security and Medicare payments when calculating filers' ability to repay debts. Democrats added their own, involving increasing the minimum wage. The Senate managed to whittle 300 amendments into 12, but by then Congress was eager to adjourn for the year.
So we can see why the bill passed in the House, but in the Senate things went in a different direction. The Clinton administration warned us that it thought the bill was tilted towards creditors, so he'd veto it. The bill focuses on perceived abuses of the bankruptcy system by debtors without adequately addressing abuses by creditors.
The goal of the 1999 overhaul was similar to the 1998 overhaul. We wanted more for debtors filed under Chapter 13, which involves reorganization of debts under the repayment plan, rather than Chapter 7, which involves liquidation of assets, to pay creditors and the discharge of remaining unsecured debts.
There are a number of things this bill accomplished, like credit cards being required to clearly expose interest rates. Americans have been taken advantage of, so we try to let people know what they're getting into by getting a high interest rate credit card. And for the minimum wage, we decided that by adding $1 an hour to the national minimum wage, citizens would have a better standard of living.
Nope. Thank you, Mr. President. Huh? No, you're the man. Great guy. So, we have two separate bills in the House and in the Senate. Now it goes to conference committee, where bargaining begins. During conference, there was provision added by Democrat Charles Schumer, which basically prevented abortion protesters from using bankruptcy as a means to avoid paying court-ordered fines. What happened, you ask? Well, a compromise was finally reached. The provision stated that it would bar individuals, the protesters, from using bankruptcy to escape fines for intentional, knowing, or reckless action. But it turned out too good to be true. Many Republicans opposed the compromise and managed to defeat the rule for debate on the measure. Republican leaders decided to try proposing a bill that dropped the abortion provision. This way they could reopen debate. But Senate leadership assured them that this would not pass without abortion provisions, and they were right.
I got my mind set on you.
Under a unified government, wrought with defection among the Democrats, President George W. Bush signed the bill into law. Finally, the U.S. had overhauled its bankruptcy system.
A whole lot of spending money. It's gonna take plenty of money to do it right, child. It's gonna take